Perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to August's edition of VRM Insider. It is just a minute before the hour, so we're going to go ahead and start allowing the participants to enter the room. And we are going to get rolling here in just a few seconds with PriceLabs. This is our first time having PriceLabs on VRM Insiders. We're very excited. This is a newer partnership for us here at VRM. And we're super excited to introduce you to PriceLabs today. And they're specifically going to be talking about managing pricing and stay restrictions while markets are recovering here in 2020. So I know it's a big issue. It's not a fun topic to talk about. Recovery is not a fun one. I think we all know that we have an unpredictable road ahead of us. And so these guys are going to dive in today and talk us through how their tool can help with this, and also how we can just maybe even work on some best practices when it comes to pricing and stay restrictions. So I just want to introduce you all to the PriceLabs team that's with us today. And we have Oliver and Richie. And one of the things that I like about Oliver and Richie, they have really cool last names. And they said it was totally fine if I didn't pronounce them or try to pronounce them. So we'll just call them Oliver and Richie today. And if you get an email from them, you can try their last name on your own. They're not that complicated. I could have totally done it with flying colors. I'm confident I could have. But Oliver is with business development there at PriceLabs, and Richie is co-founder. So we're just so excited to have you guys on. We've actually had a couple of meetings with these guys so far. We've got our training and support team involved and did some looks around with them. So the training and support team is up to staff to be able, up to speed to be able to help our clients, which is you. And we're ready to go. So without any further ado, let's jump into a few housekeeping items. Today, if you have any questions, be sure to use your Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. And if you don't see it, just kind of hover down towards the bottom of your Zoom screen and you'll see it pop up. There's a little button that says Q&A. And that's the place where you're going to drop in a question. Now, we encourage questions. You get bonus points. I'm not sure what the prize is, but you get bonus points for asking questions. We love, love, love questions. No question is too big and no question is too small. Because what that does is help guide the conversation in the direction that you need it to go. So don't hesitate there. If your question is appropriate for where these guys are in the webinar, we will pause and we'll take those questions right there. And if not, we'll just save them for the end. So don't be afraid to drop it in, even if we're not exactly there during the conversation at the moment. And I want to encourage everyone to please, please, please stay with us till the very end, because PriceLabs does have a special offer for VRM clients, so you don't want to miss that. So stay on to the end. They'll also have their contact information there at the end also. And as always, this is being recorded, so you can go back and watch it later or share it with any team members that weren't able to attend today. And you'll be able to find that in your inbox and or on our blog post and or on the admin console. We're going to give you all the options so you can find the replay information with ease. All right, I said my spiel, so now we're going to turn it over to PriceLabs. So Oliver, Richie, welcome to VRM Insiders.
All righty, thank you so much for the introduction. That was awesome. So as has been said many times, let's reiterate, questions are amazing. So everything we're talking about, ask lots of them, and we'll be kind of taking you through the presentation today, talking about what's going on in the market, the importance of being nimble with your pricing, and all those things here. So a quick agenda, just to give you an idea of kind of what we'll be going through. We'll start by trends that we've been seeing in the market, trends that have been happening year over year, and then also how those have been accelerated due to COVID. And then therefore the importance of dynamic pricing and really staying on top and adjusting your rates as we go through this recovery period here. We'll dive into a couple case studies, talk about how our dynamic pricing system works, talking about the integration with VRM and what you can expect there, and then showing you a quick demo of the system. Then, of course, answering any questions that we don't get to during the presentation here. Perfect. So diving right in. As all of you know and have definitely been affected by, COVID is happening. It's very real in the United States. It's affected a lot of the booking trends we've been seeing. And one of the most important things is that we can just simply, we can't rely on historic data. We can't rely on using last year's bookings to predict this year's bookings as we could have in, most previous years here. The major changes we've been seeing: volatile demand. So this is both COVID related and then also economy related. So purely less travel happening because people are a little bit afraid to travel. People are encouraged to stay where they are. And then, of course, uncertainty whether vacations will continue with the current state of a lot of people's, economic situations here. We've also seen a big change in the actual customer segments that are booking a lot of this travel. So in a lot of vacation destinations, it's shifted from a lot of international travel that we would see every year to a lot more almost exclusively domestic travel, as people are looking to travel a little closer to home, stay in their state, not fly internationally simply because of the virus going on here. And then in a lot of urban markets, those have been affected probably most hard here in the States. We've seen almost an absolute stop in business travel going on. So those markets are now propped up mostly by leisure travel, which is, of course, slowed down as well here. So both that demand side is changing, and then within demand, that customer segment's changing. Then unfortunately, we also do see a change in the supply side of things. With a lot of property management companies, with the decreased bookings that we have been seeing, a lot of them closing down, a lot of property owners switching their listings from short-term rentals to long-term rentals, purely to try to capitalize on whatever demand might still be steady here. So both the demand side and the supply side is changing, which makes for super interesting trends here. And I see that my camera's going in and out, so let me stop my video real quick to keep that from being distracted here. Alrighty. So the first kind of major shift that we wanted to go into, this is a trend that's been happening year over year for the past many, many years. So, 2015 to 16, 16 to 17, 17 to 18, and so on. The shift here is that we're slowly moving towards shorter booking windows. So this isn't something that is purely COVID related. This has been something that's been happening for a good chunk of time, now has purely been accelerated due to COVID. So in this graph, what we're looking at here is new bookings made for July in all previous months. So these lines are tracking how many bookings were made for July in October, November, December, etc. here. So what we see, of course, 2018 is in gray, 2019 is in blue here. Each year, we see a peak, kind of a slow peak here for July bookings right after the holidays. So once people are done planning their Christmas, their New Year's plans, they start slowly thinking about their kind of upcoming vacations and planning those next trips here. So what we see, those bookings have been relatively consistent. Each year has its spike here. But what's changing is kind of the bookings coming after that peak. So if we look at this graph for 2018, we can see that typically 4 months out, so roughly around mid-March, start of April, bookings tend to pick up pretty drastically as people start really booking those vacations for July here. You'll see that the 2019 graph started lagging behind 2018's trends. So where bookings started picking up right around mid-March in 2018, bookings didn't pick up until about mid-April, end of April in 2019 here. So why is that important? If you're basing all of your pricing adjustments purely off of last year's trends and last year's pacing, your initial reaction in 2019, right around mid-March, the start of April, your initial reaction would be, hey, my bookings for July aren't increasing as they should be historically. Let's drop our rates to try to fill the calendars and get more bookings here. Now, of course, nothing wrong with dropping your rates. However, what you do have to keep in mind is that that demand is still there. It's just been pushed out further to the right so that more of those bookings are coming in later. They're still going to come in, just people haven't started necessarily booking their trips here, start of March or so. So with that, totally fine to drop rates, but just really, it really requires you to be nimble with your pricing strategy. So it requires you to monitor the market so that when you do see these trends changing and more people booking those July rates, you have to know to go in, increase prices, to really not be leaving money on the table. Now, that was drastically highlighted here with COVID, where we saw July bookings pretty much come to a standstill here in March and April, when we would typically see those bookings picking up here. So because of the uncertainty for, hey, what will travel look like in 2 or 3 months here? Will people be flying? Will beaches be open? Will everyone still be staying home? We saw bookings really pushed out to the last minute here. So if you were dropping your rates in March and April for the summer to try to get some of that demand here, you really were caught, if your pants down a little bit come May and come June, when a lot of those bookings started picking up, that demand kind of got back into the market, and a lot of those rates that were dropped initially were snagged up for really low prices here. So really, when we're monitoring these trends that are so volatile, you definitely need to be checking in on your rates on, let's say, a weekly basis, if not more frequently, just to make sure that these booking paces aren't changing here. Now, when we're looking at—
Can I stop you for just a second? I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a Tracy question. This is not a client question. So 2 things. One, which if you have this later in the presentation, that's cool, is where do you guys source that data from? The data that you are looking at. And then number 2 is there any resources inside that data explaining why the difference, and I see your question mark, wasn't an exception or a question mark. I'm just wondering if everybody's just becoming a procrastinator like Tracy and waiting to the last minute, or question mark. And obviously, like you said, those trends were, going back, to, the trend started back 18 and 19. We can see that trend increasing. And then, of course, part of it, of course, we can assume is COVID this year. So just curiosity, do my questions make sense?
Your questions definitely make sense. So first, let's address that data question. The data that we're showing in this graph here, this is data from bookings for PriceLabs customers. So this is data just to show what's been happening internally in the US markets here. But the data that we show in our platform, we show a lot of this data that really highlights these trends, lead time, length of stay, how long people are booking for. That data that we show customers comes from Airbnb. So there you have full market data where we're tracking how bookings are changing, what new bookings are coming in, and we're tracking that on a daily basis and seeing how that refreshes. And that's all going to be shown to you through Airbnb data. Now, as for this question mark, so why we're seeing these trends of booking window shifting off to the right, that's a great question and something to definitely highlight here. So we believe that that trend is largely due to most bookings shifting over to online these days. So for a lot of those historic vacation rental destinations, in the past, things were always done either over the phone, or when you were staying on one vacation, you would be going into the office, booking your next vacation. Therefore, things happen in person, and things were kind of pushed out a lot further in advance. When you're booking over the phone, you don't necessarily know how much availability there is. So it's always better to book way far in advance to make sure you get that listing that you want for your next vacation here. Now, with larger property managers shifting over to either having direct booking websites where you can see all of the available units, compare their pricing, you might log in January and see, hey, there's still 200 available units in the area that I'm looking to book. Maybe it's not as urgent to book now. We can procrastinate a little bit, push that out since we're still likely to get something for the dates that we want. So that's people who would have already been booking, kind of changing their trends to now book later. Whereas also with the rise of OTAs and a lot of property managers now listing on Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, we're seeing a new customer segment, typically a lot of younger folks who might have not been, going to these vacation destinations previously, but now that it's so streamlined, going on Airbnb, looking for a quick getaway trip, they're booking a lot more last minute. So they're not planning those vacations that happen year over year. They're not those returning customers. They're purely saying, hey, let's get a weekend getaway or let's get a week during the summer. They go on Airbnb, see these listings that they otherwise wouldn't be exposed to, and now they're booking a lot more last minute here. So that's our hunch on these booking windows changing year over year, mostly just that access to supply. Does that answer those questions?
Beautifully, yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for the clarification. And everyone else, do chime in. I know we're looking at a lot of data here. So, of course, when we're looking at July trends, very easy. Hindsight is 2020. It's easy to say, hey, why didn't you increase your rates in May and June? Why did you let your listing get booked for such a low rate when demand ended up actually being high? Now, if we look into what's happening for October of this year, that's something that we don't quite have data for yet. So we have this 2018 and 2019 data that shows similar trends. More people were booking earlier in 2018. More last minute bookings were happening in 2019 here. However, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen in 2020. So far, we see that 2020 is pacing behind what we saw in 2018 and 2019. However, we don't know when that spike will happen, and also we don't know if that spike will happen. So since there's been a lot of talk about that second wave of infections potentially happening in the fall, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in the market. People maybe will be changing their travel plans. People maybe will say, hey, let's hold off even longer to see what travel looks like once we get even closer to October. So what we're anticipating is, of course, demand pushed out as far to the last minute as possible here. However, we're not sure if that demand will get there. So if you do choose to, let's say, decrease your rates now to get a solid base of bookings, you might say, hey, better to get something on the books now for an extremely low rate versus waiting for that demand to pick up last minute. The one thing to really focus on is to keep checking your booking pace, keep checking your occupancies, make sure those aren't going up like crazy all of a sudden, make sure the market isn't filling up like crazy all of a sudden, so that you can really stay on top of your prices. And when that spike in demand does happen, you essentially know to raise your rates and kind of stay ahead of that trend there. So really, we're pushing for updating your rates and checking on your metrics as frequently as possible because of how variable the trends are. And this year really is not like anything we've experienced previously. Perfect. So in addition to pricing, another trend that is extremely important is your length of stay restrictions. So of course, pricing determines how much people are paying. Your length of stay restrictions determine what length of stay they can book for. Now, this graph here is again showing bookings made for July. But on the y-axis here, we're showing the average stay duration of those bookings that were made. So as you can imagine, bookings made for July way back in October of the previous year, those have a much longer average length of stay than bookings made, let's say, a month or two in advance. So that's largely because those longer stays just require a lot more planning, a lot more logistics. They're typically larger groups that are staying for longer periods of times. They're typically, people having to take off time from work, having to coordinate with those groups. So as you can imagine, they're booking a lot further in advance here. Whereas last minute, you'll be capturing a lot of those crowds who are either booking weekends. We can see we hit about a 3-day average last minute. So we'll be seeing people booking, maybe midweeks, any gaps in between bookings, everyone who kind of procrastinated on their vacation plans and now is trying to fit in a short trip. So one thing to be mindful of is that by optimizing your length of stay based off of who's booking at what time, you can really protect your calendar from being blocked by short bookings way far in advance. Then also make sure that your listing is actually seen by the people who are booking at the time. So for example, let's say in October, let's say you have a standard minimum stay of 3 nights. Come October, if someone were to book a 3-night booking in your high season, that would block someone else who might have booked a 2-week vacation there. And of course, a 2-week booking, much more attractive than a 3-night booking. Just, fewer gaps in your calendar, easier to fill your entire calendar, less turnover, less cleaning for you to do. So you really want to make sure that your calendars are available for those longer bookings that happen way far in advance, so that someone doesn't block it with a shorter 2-day stay here. As we get closer to the booking date, you want to make sure that you're adjusting that minimum stay. So if you, for example, have a 7-night minimum set for all of your dates that are, all of your bookings that are, let's say, 6 months in advance, if we get to be 3 months in advance, a lot of people who are booking would no longer kind of see your listing as available there. So you would want to get more flexible on your policies and potentially reduce that length of stay to attract those people who are booking more last minute. So in PriceLabs, we definitely show you a lot of this data for how to identify who is booking when and how long they're staying, so that you can update these policies on your own. The main problem here with updating these policies is, of course, property managers, you guys are managing a lot of listings, and that's an extremely manual process to say, hey, we're 8 months in advance, let's set this minimum stay restriction. As we get closer, let's change our minimum stay restriction. If you're updating this for all of your listings individually, just takes a lot of time, and therefore, it's the right strategy to do, but it just might not be feasible with everything else you have going on. So when we were looking at COVID in particular, with the customers using PriceLabs, looking into our data, what we noticed is that everyone, all of our hosts who were kind of early to react to the bigger trends, they were able to win big and really either maintain the historic occupancies that they have had, or fare quite a bit better than the market average here. So the real key difference between them and the other hosts who maybe, didn't see the occupancies that they were expecting is purely the ability to react early to these changing trends. So for example, let's say in February, when there was a lot of uncertainty around travel restrictions, the hosts who would decrease their last minute lengths of stay pretty drastically, they were the ones who scooped in a lot of those, 2, 3, 4-night bookings. For a lot of guests who, weren't booking leisure stays, they were mostly trying to figure out, hey, my travel plans have changed pretty drastically. I need a place to figure out what my next steps are here. Then in March, for example, we saw a huge drop in demand in March. We started seeing a lot of cancellations. We started seeing just a lot fewer people booking. So those hosts who dropped rates the fastest really picked up on any demand that was left in the market. Since they were the ones with the lowest rates early on, they were able to fill in their calendars. Now, a lot of hosts follow suit and drop their rates, afterwards, once dropping rates was really the only thing to do to get bookings. Those hosts were then competing with everyone else who had already lowered rates, and there weren't enough bookings coming in, to fill everyone's calendar. So really reacting quickly and being ahead of the trends is what sets you apart. Everyone's going to get there eventually, but if you're the first one there, you really do capture a lot more of that demand that's still remaining here. Same thing in April. I don't know if you guys were exposed to this, but we saw a big trend for midterm stays in March and April in 2020 here. So a lot of guests were moving towards booking 2-week-long stays, month-long stays to have a place either to quarantine or to spend their quarantine. So really that was a major trend we saw in urban and vacation rental markets. So hosts who essentially set those weekly discounts to be a little more aggressive, set their monthly discounts to be more aggressive, protected their calendars from those shorter stays by setting those higher minimum stays a little further out. They were able to capitalize on that. And in a lot of cases, we saw booking calendars that still had, 80, 90, 100% occupancy during April when markets were extremely slow. And then lastly, of course, in June and early July, when that recovery really started in those vacation destinations, right around that long weekend that we had there, those who saw that demand increasing and were able to increase their rates, they left a lot less money on the table than hosts who, got all of their listings booked out, say, hey, wow, I finally got bookings, but they could have been charging a lot more for those higher demand dates. Since demand was still there, it was just pushed further out, as we were saying earlier. So that kind of covers the data side of what we were hoping to share about the trend. So if you do have any questions about that, drop them in now and we can kind of bounce back to this data aspect, talk about any trends we saw, go into a little more detail there. But talking about reacting early, and kind of the problem here is essentially that reacting early is just so time consuming. As hosts, I know you guys have so much going on, especially we're entering the high season now. You don't necessarily have the time to access all of your local data, look into your internal booking analytics to see the pacing that's coming in. You don't have the time to necessarily monitor all these trends on a daily or weekly basis so you can really be ahead of them. And then if you do see those spikes in bookings, really adjusting your rates super frequently isn't necessarily feasible when it is a manual process that you have to repeat week over week here. It just really does take a lot of time if you don't have a team dedicated specifically to revenue management, let's say. So to have a nimble pricing strategy, you really do have to have that human aspect of it, where someone is monitoring the market, figuring out what the right strategy is for, the data that we currently have coming in. But then you really do need some sort of automation structure in place so that when you do identify that strategy, you're able to react quickly, whether that's making a bulk adjustment to all rates, whether that's having an algorithm in place that increasing your prices automatically as demand increases. That's all very necessary here to actually do things both effectively and efficiently. So that is essentially where a system like PriceLabs would come in, where what we do is at the base of the pyramid is collecting and cleaning all of that market data for you. So we're constantly tracking Airbnb, Booking.com. We'll be integrating with HomeAway and VRBO pretty soon here to get more of their market data into our mix. And we're essentially collecting data on what new bookings are coming in, how is occupancy changing in markets around the world, and we're really processing that data and updating it on a daily basis here. Then our system goes in and adjusts your rates live based off of the trends that we're seeing. We're also able to display that data in easily digestible graphs so that instead of looking through the competition on Airbnb and Booking.com, you're able to see, hey, these are the new bookings that are coming in. This is how long people are staying for, and really just looking at graphs versus looking at long lists of that data on your end here. You're then able to implement any rules or strategies on your end to really reflect, that pricing strategy aspect that you want to be tackling here based off of the data that you're seeing. So you can implement different occupancy-based adjustments where based off of the internal occupancy of your listings or the occupancy of your entire portfolio, you can have your prices adjust automatically. So really react to those trends that we're seeing in the market. You can, of course, set different seasonal minimum prices. So since there is a system automating some of these pricing, just having that control over saying, hey, this is my minimum that my owners are comfortable with, and that'll just repeat year over year. So that's not something you have to reset. There's no, week-long period where everyone focuses on pricing. That'll just kind of automatically go into effect. And then, of course, to optimize some of those minimum stay restrictions and fill some of those gaps in between bookings, we do just have an automated process for managing all of that. So you can spend more time really focusing on the planning behind, hey, this is what I want my rate structure to be. This is how I want to react to different changing market trends, and less time on the manual integration of you personally going in and adjusting things listing by listing. Then, of course, we let you kind of make all of your adjustments in bulk. So a lot of you have larger portfolios, so letting you do bulk adjustments for groups or your entire account here. And then, of course, sending all of those updates over to VRM specifically. And apologies for that typo here, reusing some slides. Perfect. So really having that connected to your PMS is extremely important, where all of our rates feed to where your team's, really working on a daily basis, so that everyone's on the same page. All of your OTAs are being updated, and that's not necessarily a manual process where you have two disjointed tools. Everything kind of works together very cleanly here. And we, of course, have both support teams, working to make sure those syncs are going through smoothly. So I wanted to quickly go over a couple case studies for how PriceLabs has worked for some of our customers. So Summit Cove, they're definitely a larger property manager in the Keystone, Colorado area. So I know they manage a lot of those kind of luxury villas out there, a lot of those apartments out there. And their experience was that they had been doing manual revenue managements for decades. So they had a lot of that internal data. They had a lot of the know-how for how they wanted to be adjusting rates. They just didn't have a great way for actually implementing those changes into their system. So for them, the partnership really allowed them to focus on the big picture, focus on the strategy, say, hey, this is what's happening in our market. This is how we want to react, and spend a lot less time changing those individual nightly rates and minimum stay restrictions, since that in itself is basically a full-time job here. So for them, they were saying that, hey, PriceLabs, all of the data that we're using, it allows them to capture more reservations when demand is low, since we're always optimizing for those things, and then higher rates when demand is high, since we're, checking those high demand dates. Anything that your team might have missed, our system just inserts there automatically. Then, of course, a nice comment about our customer service team, which we can attest to. We focus a lot of our effort on customer service, making sure you get your questions answered pretty quickly here. Then another quick case study, AlterHome. They've been a great partner with us here. And again, they're more focused, saying that, hey, before PriceLabs, we were looking at our rates daily. That was pretty much one person's full-time job. Whereas now with the automation, we're able to only dedicate 1 or 2 hours per week. So for them, it is that time saving where, hey, they knew what they should be adjusting. They know that they should be making these adjustments. It's just the execution. That's where that automation is super powerful and just freeing up a lot of time, especially when you're in the high season, you're dealing with all of these, with the 100 things that I know property managers deal with that I luckily never have to touch here. So just wanted to share those kind of details with you here.
I have another quick question for you, and this may be, nope. So when, obviously a potential client can save money simply by just automating the process, because then you're going to be taking less man hours. So it's going to save you time. Time equals money. But do you have any case studies that reflect from someone who previously had a fully manual system or no system, no system of adjustment, or just didn't focus much time, energy, and effort in that area, then versus going with an automated system and actually spending that time, like the Colorado client you just had listed here, focusing on the big picture, focusing on how they actually wanted to react and being able to react appropriately. Do you have any data sets reflective of that, as far as just, okay, theoretically, you could save up to X percent or gain X percent more bookings by just simply doing automation. Do you have anything like that?
Definitely. So we have a lot of users where before joining PriceLabs, they either had a completely flat pricing structure where they would go in once a year, set their rates for the year, maybe set them by season, maybe input some of their holidays and purely set it and forget it. They say, hey, we optimized our rates and now people are going to book those rates. So we have a lot of customers who are coming in where they aren't doing a lot of that revenue management on a day-to-day basis. They either just have flat fees or kind of those seasonal fees established. And especially during COVID, we had a lot of customers come in where with those flat fees that they were charging, they definitely weren't optimized for what the condition of the market was. They weren't optimized for that decrease in demand. So simply by turning on PriceLabs, PriceLabs sees what trends are happening in the market, adjusts your rates to fit those trends. They immediately went from, let's say, 15% occupancy, which was below where their market was pacing, to roughly 60% occupancy. And that's a case study we have written out, but we can send that in a follow-up email here. So we do have a lot of users where they're just currently missing out on a lot of that market fluctuation that's going on, where just by having your rates really reflect those trends, you don't necessarily even have to check in. Nothing changes on your end. You don't have to set any customizations in PriceLabs since our system's just automating that entire process for you here. So definitely, lots of
one additional thing to add here.
Yeah.
If you also go to our website, you'll see in the top navigation bar resources section, and under resources section you'll see case studies, and we keep adding case studies on our website, which you can see. Like, those are also interesting case studies to read about because these are other sort of similar businesses that are talking about how they use PriceLabs and how does it help them. And we've put a special focus on it. Tracy, particularly like your question, a bunch of people ask about that business is not like mine. So we're starting to add a lot more case studies here. But also, Oliver, if you scroll down, there is that Capterra link. And if you click on it, there are about 50, 60 customers who talk about 57 customers who talk about how they use PriceLabs, why they like PriceLabs, what kind of results have they seen.
Definitely, yeah. So big focus on getting as many different customer types here. So hello.pricelabs.co, head over to the case studies page, and that has a lot of great articles to read through for sure. Awesome. So definitely, yeah. So whether you're looking to automate those manual processes or just make your pricing smarter, our system does both of those things, so you can use whichever tools kind of cater most to what you're looking for here. So that actually transitions well to our automated pricing and diving into how we actually automate these rates, how we implement these trends that we see in the market. So everything starts essentially when you connect your VRM account to PriceLabs. With that connection, we're able to see where you've been priced historically and what your historic occupancies have been. So that data lets us know roughly where to set a base price for your listings, which is essentially an average price for the entire year, or you can think of it as a price level here. So the reason that we're doing it based off of your internal data versus purely off of market data here is because you might have 2 one-bedroom listings. One of them might be a penthouse with gold finishes and a view of the sea, whereas the other one might be, a ground level apartment that hasn't been updated recently, that just comes nowhere near to the quality of the other one. So we'll estimate this base price for you based off of where you've been priced historically, with the assumption that, hey, the rates you've been using have been working well for you. However, if we see that occupancy has been super low or super high, we might recommend a higher or slightly lower base price here. So the base price, definitely the starting point onto which we start applying all the trends that we're seeing in the data. So all of our data that we're using here is getting pulled directly from Airbnb and Booking.com. And we're essentially able to estimate trends that are hyper-specific to your market, and trends in things like seasonality, so where's your high season, where's your low season, and adjust rates based off of how demand changes between the two and everywhere in between here. Add on trends like day of week adjustments, where we're able to say, hey, this is how much more in demand your weekends are versus your weekdays, depending on the market that you're in. And this is how you should be adjusting your prices accordingly here. And then, of course, looking at our neighborhood demand, where here we're looking hyper-local. We're looking at roughly the 300 or so listings that are closest to you. We're tracking what the demand is for those listings in all future dates. So wherever we see increases in demand, where more of those listings have been booked, we essentially know, hey, this is a high demand date. Let's increase your prices since there's likely an event or a holiday that's driving demand specifically to your area. So same thing goes for any of those extremely slow periods. If we notice, hey, no one's booking this week, it looks atypically slow, we'll drop your rates a little bit just to optimize them for that lower demand to make sure you get bookings here. And for all of these trends, so day of week adjustments, seasonality, last minute discounts, any events and holidays, these are all things that you have control over in PriceLabs. So you can then go in and adjust our rates accordingly. But once we optimize this calendar for you, we'd essentially display all of our rate recommendations in one kind of listing calendar where each date is associated with a price that's optimized for what's going on that specific day here. So then we would essentially take that price, and that is what would be synced over to VRM and then sent out to all of the OTAs from there. So that automation side is really looking at the market data and optimizing listing the prices for the trends that we're seeing. However, we of course give you full control over, hey, this is the price level that I want to be charging at. So you're always determining, hey, this is how much my listing is worth, but let's optimize my listing for the bookings that we're seeing at that kind of price level here, if that makes sense. Now, the second half of the system revolves around you optimizing your reservation policies based off of the market data that we're showing you. So we've recently, especially during COVID, put a big focus on a lot of our analytics. So trying to show you as much data as possible, showing how prices and bedroom counts vary by location in your city, showing what bookings are coming in for all future dates, showing you trends in lead time, trends in length of stay based off of lead time, all sorts of trends, things like cleaning fees, weekly, monthly discounts in your area. So we're really trying to give you as much data as possible so you can make informed decisions about those reservation policies and what you want your minimum stays to be. Since I know a lot of property managers simply do, hey, this has worked in the past. However, with COVID and all of these changing booking trends year over year, what's been happening in the past isn't necessarily what's happening in the upcoming months. So good to definitely keep a pulse on the market so you can adjust accordingly. Then with that reservation data, we try to give you as many levers to pull as possible. So you can say, hey, you know, last minute bookings are slow in my area. Let me set a more aggressive last minute discount just so I can try to really, you know, fill in my calendar, fill in all those gaps that might have not been booked earlier. We let you set things like orphan fillers, so changing the price and the minimum stay for any gaps in your calendar, day of week adjustments, basically any trend that affects pricing, you can adjust it in our system here. So also additionally, the ability to adjust your internal rates based off of the occupancy of individual listings. So if you're ever pacing slower than what you want to be, we discount your prices. And then if you're ever getting too many bookings, pacing quicker than you would expect, we'd put premiums on your prices. So a lot of flexibility where you're only focused on setting these rules. And then our system is focused on actually implementing these into your pricing and making those adjustments automatically. So really that time saving there where you're just focused on the strategy side of things. Same goes for your minimum stay strategies. So it's great to know that, let's say 6 months in advance, people book 2-week-long stays, but keeping your calendar up to date, that's the tough part here. So making those manual adjustments. What you would do in PriceLabs is basically set your standard minimum stay. So you could say, hey, I typically take 3 nights bookings during my weekdays, 4-night minimums on my weekend. However, since there is a lot of last minute demand for those shorter trips, feel free to drop my last minute bookings down to a 2-night minimum, for example, within the last 5 days here. Alternatively, you can say, hey, if someone's booking more than 90 days in advance, the data shows that there's a lot of longer bookings coming in. So let's only let people book if they have a longer length of stay in mind here. So this all gets updated directly in PriceLabs. You set the rules here, and then we send that final product over to VRM so that your calendar in VRM would then have that minimum stay data, which would refresh daily and stay up to date based off of these rules that you're setting here. And final rule, of course, a gap filler. So if anyone's ever trying to book a gap that's shorter than your standard minimum stay restriction, we could automatically adjust that to make those gaps bookable based off of any rules you set here. So really focused on the strategy side of things. Any questions that come to mind about that automation and setting these strategies based off of the data here?
I'm pretty sure you already answered it in just the last 2 seconds, but just want to reiterate or ask that if I were to go in and I change a minimum stay for last minute bookings, then those changes are updated on a daily basis?
Correct, yes. So how the sync works with PriceLabs, once you start syncing your rates with VRM, we go in every night, usually between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. Central Time. We'd send your most up-to-date rates and minimum stays over to VRM. And by having that daily refresh, we're able to really implement these rules here. So I think my next slide talks about that a little bit. So if you were to, let's say, manage your pricing in PriceLabs, all changes that you make, you would want to now make them in PriceLabs just because we have a lot of those toggles and things. And then you would basically be able to sync those rates over to VRM. That sync would happen daily. So it's extremely important to make all of your changes only in PriceLabs, since any changes that you make in VRM would get overwritten by those new changes that are coming in from PriceLabs on a daily basis. So we're deleting whatever was in VRM, refreshing it with PriceLabs' rates and minimum stays, and then VRM connects to all of the OTAs, so sends those rates over to booking.com, Airbnb, your direct booking site, VRBO HomeAway, wherever you have your rates going, VRM would handle sending rates that way. Perfect. Great. And I know the Q&A has been slow, so if any questions do pop up, do type them in. We can address them as we're going or at the end here. Perfect. Last thing to highlight before we go into a quick demo here. Of course, it's great to have optimized rates. It's great to be making more money for your bookings. But the question is, at what cost? Here at PriceLabs, we do offer a flat pricing structure. So we're purely charging you a fixed fee per listing based off of the number of properties that you have. And we're not charging you a commission for every booking that comes in. So there's no percentage of revenue. There's no setup fee. It's purely a monthly fixed fee per listing that is syncing. We do start everyone off with a 30-day free trial. Just so you can see, hey, this is what managing rates in PriceLabs feels like. This is, how much quicker it is. These are all the rate recommendations that PriceLabs is offering. Are they working well with my listings? You have 30 days to try that out. And we, of course, sit down with you. We have a whole onboarding process to help you go live with your listings and help make sure that you're making the most of PriceLabs here. Additionally, it's good to note that all of our billing is purely month to month. So we're not locking you into any contracts after the trial. We're not saying, hey, you have to sync, 10 listings all year. We're purely saying sync however many listings you want, and we'll only charge you for that amount. If that changes month to month, that's totally fine. No worries, no contracts here. Then finally, we have you pay at the end of the month, not the start. So you're purely paying us from those potentially extra profits that you're generating through those higher booking rates versus paying to access the software at the start of the month here. And the last thing to note, of course, we mentioned it earlier in those case studies, but our support, truly excellent, 24/5 customer support. So someone's always there to take care of you during the weekday, response times under 4 hours. And then, as Richie mentioned earlier, if you do want to see what other users are saying about PriceLabs, I mean, Capterra, great resource for you there. Otherwise, our case studies and those really dive into all the different types of customers and how PriceLabs has worked for them. Perfect. So if there are no questions here, we can dive into just a quick little demo that we have set up just to show you guys what the actual interface of PriceLabs looks like so you can get a better idea of the day-to-day for managing rates through PriceLabs here. So let's hop right in here. Great. So basically, you would start by connecting your VRM listings to PriceLabs. Very simple integration process. We have a couple articles written out here. So if you just search VRM in this little help bubble, it'll help you kind of go through the steps needed on VRM to get all those API keys and whatnot to get your listings connected. That shouldn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes or so, and then you'll see all of your listings pulled into PriceLabs here. Right off the bat on this homepage, this is where we show you rough listing metrics to give you a quick view on the performance of all of your properties to identify, hey, do any of these listings need any adjustments here? So here on the right-hand side, we're showing you what percentage of the upcoming 7, 30, and 60 days. You can, of course, edit these date ranges. What percentage of those are currently vacant so that you know, hey, you know, if there's low vacancy, the listing's performing well, let's maybe even increase rates. If there's high vacancy like this listing here, let's definitely take a look at review prices and maybe decrease our rates just because no one's booking here. So this is where you would see all of these pricing recommendations based off of what's happening in the market. You can scrub through all the different months. If there's ever any recommendations for dates that you know are in high demand or any recommendations that look too high, you can always click and drag on any dates, make any adjustments, set either a fixed price or a percent change to our recommended price, adjust your minimum stay for any holidays, any events, any high seasons, things like that, or simply set a different minimum price for those dates based off of what you know that you want to get there. Then you can, of course, dive further into the customizations. And these are all things that PriceLabs would automatically optimize for you. So things like last minute prices, orphan day discounts, day of week adjustments, we're automatically setting these based off of the market data. However, this does give you just an interface for going in and making adjustments as necessary. So as you're viewing that market data, as you're viewing the bookings that are coming in, you can of course go in and say, hey, all of my weekends are not getting, or let's say getting booked way far out in the future. I think I'm leaving a little bit of money on the table. You could go in and say, hey, let's increase those by 15%, for example. Or you could go in, set different automated strategies, set different seasonal minimums and all those things purely on the listing by listing basis here. Now, since a lot of you have quite a few listings that you're managing, a lot of those properties might require similar trends, we let you set things on the group level as well. So into our customizations here, this is all catered around just making things a little easier and quicker to manage. So you can of course set account level overrides here, where you could say, hey, for all of my VRM listings, I want the same minimum stay, that same dynamic minimum stay to go into place for all of my properties since they all require the same setting. You would just set that once here in the account level settings, and that would then apply to all properties, a lot less clicking than going listing by listing. Additionally, if you have, let's say, different groups of listings that require different trends, so looking at like your condos versus so like your condos and your resort properties versus like your villas and cabins. Those typically have very different booking trends. Villas and cabins get booked a lot further in advance than some of those condos and some of those resorts. They're typically different sizes, so you might want to change your pricing strategy between the two a little bit. You could set one set of customizations that's optimized for condos, and then another set of customizations that's optimized for villas. You're only setting things in two places. Then if you assign listings to these groups, they would inherit all of these settings that you've just set in one place here. So definitely makes managing things in bulk a little easier. And for these villas and cabins, let's say they all require a pricing increase for the new year. You could go in, click and drag on these dates, and simply set a pricing increase for all listings in that group here. So you could say, hey, increase my price by 50%. I'm feeling ambitious. Add that in, and now all of your listings in this group get that 50% increase on these dates. So trying to make the system as flexible as possible for property managers who are really managing a lot of listings so that you're changing things as few times as possible and really saving as much time in this pricing process here. Then for the kind of day-to-day, most of our users typically live in the multi-calendar, where you can, of course, filter your listings to see certain groups of listings or see certain listings that you've tagged a certain way. You can tag listings by, let's say, pool, by city, by unit type. So you can first filter those listings and then see all of our pricing recommendations for all of your upcoming dates, and therefore make any adjustments. So you could say, hey, this listing, I want to set a 4-night minimum stay here. This listing, I want to increase the price by, let's say, 10%. And that just makes the pricing process a lot easier. You're not waiting for those calendars to refresh. You can manage everything on one page, change any of these customizations that you might have on the listing level, reassign groups, change your minimum and your base price a lot more quickly than going listing by listing here. So that is essentially PriceLabs in a nutshell, and how you would make these rate adjustments in the system here. Of course, trying to make things as intuitive as possible. And of course, that was a very brief overview. So if you are looking to learn more, you can always reach out here, and we'll be sending a kind of post-webinar email to potentially hop on a call to, talk about how PriceLabs would work for your specific use case and dive more into this kind of day-to-day management here. Perfect. So last things to cover.
Oliver, before one quick question.
Yes, sir.
Back on your calendar.
Yeah.
Sammy's asking, is it easy to identify which rates are the ones PL has changed, PriceLabs has changed, versus what rates PM has changed on the calendar?
Got it. So yes, so any manual adjustments you make in the calendar here, those will show up as these kind of overrides. So these darker bars at the bottom of your screen here. So here you can see that we set a fixed price of $145. The final price gets reflected in this kind of bubble here. But here you're able to say, hey, this is a fixed price that we set. Anything that doesn't have one of these overrides, that would essentially be a recommendation that's based off of both PriceLabs' algorithm and any of those pricing strategies that you've set up in PriceLabs here to automatically impact these rates. So this would be the final price that then gets sent over to the PMS directly.
Great. And once again, there's a Q&A thing at the bottom. Feel free to ask your questions there. It helps everyone, so don't be shy.
Definitely. Cool. Perfect.
No more questions, Oliver.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, last couple slides to address here before we jump into that full Q&A mode here. So first off, thank you for listening. For all of our VRM users on the webinar today, we're offering 50% off of your first 3 months. So you'll basically just see a greatly reduced invoice here. And that's if you create an account and start syncing your listings by September 15th here. So about a month to start talking about PriceLabs, run it by the team. We're always happy to discuss more if you're curious about how the solution would work for you. And then we'll be discounting those first 3 months of invoices coming your way. And additionally, so our next feature that I'll go into more detail in just a second here, but market dashboard. So this is a tool that we have for really analyzing that data in your area of listings in. We've made these free until the end of the year. Dashboards that you create in PriceLabs using the promo code VRMPLMD. So if you set up a dashboard before August 31st, I'll show you how to set up those dashboards in just a second here. Dashboards are totally separate from our dynamic pricing. So that's something that you could do now just to get that market data, discuss dynamic pricing with your team. But market dashboards, that's really where we break down a lot of that data for what's happening in your market. And to show you a quick overview of what that looks like, that's just this market dashboards tab in the top right. I have one preloaded. Basically how it works, it lets you select a radius around any address that you want to analyze. We'll be showing a ton of data for what types of bookings and how bookings are coming in the area. So things like just general breakdowns of how many of each bedroom count are there in whatever radius you choose to analyze, median prices, median length of stays, median lead times, just so you can see, hey, this is how bookings are coming in, showing you trends in what new bookings are being generated and how the pace of new bookings has been changing week by week here. Most importantly, we show you different future-looking trends, so capturing things like occupancy and what's the current occupancy of all future dates in the market here. This data all refreshes on a daily basis, so you can kind of keep checking back in and keep checking on the occupancy of your market, what new bookings were created in the last 7, 14, and 30 days, just so you can stay on top of those trends and really see if there's any major spikes that shift things in either direction here. Compare your rates to the rates that others are charging around you and all those good things. Where I think it gets really interesting is when we dive into length of stay and lead time trends. This is where you can be a lot more actionable on those different pricing strategies. So you can see for this market, you can see the occupancy broken down based off of how many days most people are booking. So we can see the most popular kind of booking length is 3 to 7 days for the most part here. And then that, of course, a good chunk of bookings in that 7 to 14 day range as well. Then we'll break that down, showing you based off of the lead time. So how far in advance are people booking? How long their stays are for. So what's interesting for this market, you can see very last minute, within the last 1 or 2 days. That's when a lot of those bookings for 2 days or fewer really pick in. So if you're currently offering 2-night bookings, maybe think about restricting those to only apply in the last 2 days or so, since they don't really make up a significant portion of bookings beforehand. Beforehand are that kind of 3 to 7 day range. Then you can also think about, hey, once we start getting 60 plus days out, that's when those 15 to 30 day bookings are really making up a significant chunk of bookings here. So think about changing your restrictions to really account for these trends here. Then lastly, things on policies and fees. So comparing your cleaning fees to the market around you. You can of course filter by bedroom type, since that has a big impact on cleaning. You can see what weekly and monthly discounts people are offering, just to truly optimize the policy side of things for what guests are really looking to book here. So market dashboards, these can be used as a standalone tool. If you were to create a trial account with PriceLabs, you just head up to market dashboards here and then click create new dashboard, and you can set one of those up for any area that you want more data on, so you can really focus on optimizing those trends based on what's happening in the market here. So those are our 2 offers for today. Of course, 50% discount on your first 3 months, and then those free market dashboards until the end of the year if you get those set up in the next 2 weeks or so here. So I believe that's everything from our end. So let's definitely, focus on the Q&A and answering some of those questions that might have come in here.
There aren't any questions right this second in the Q&A portion.
Okie dokie.
However, I do think, A, wow, what a great offer, and B, what a great time of year this offer is coming at. I know our property managers are still very busy. I know we're seeing an extended summer in many of our markets. You know, people just continue to book, which is fabulous. So, you know, the fall breather into winter that, you know, we often get is going to be extended a little bit. I'm sure all these property managers are ready for a breather, but happy for the business. But I just want to encourage everyone, as you begin to transition into your fall and into your winter season, and you're looking at the changes that you're going to make, looking at making adjustments, especially in your shoulder seasons, which are just so crucial. If you can extend out those shoulder seasons as part of this recovery effort, for all things 2020 has thrown at us, you know, this is a great tool to do that with. And so I just want to encourage everyone to take the time, put it on your calendar, get up with the guys at PriceLabs, and let them walk you through some things personalized to you. Maybe explain your personal pain points and see how they can help. I know if there's one thing that all property managers don't mind more of, that is more bookings and more revenue, right? So I don't hear anybody complain about more bookings and more revenue, and actually, you know, being able to know how your bookings are being made and being able to make educated decisions is fantastic. So I have a question. So for whether somebody is seeing information, if they were to set up a regular revenue account and the revenue management account, or whether they're working on the, I think you might have to go back to screen, market, help me, market.
Yeah, market dashboards.
Market dashboard. So whether they're looking at either one, do you guys have some tutorials or maybe some videos or blog posts to kind of walk through how to use those most efficiently or anything like that?
Definitely, yeah. So for anyone on this call who has any questions, is wondering how they would get set up here, we're always happy to hop on a call just to get you set up, make sure you know how to use PriceLabs, make sure you know what you're looking at in market dashboards to get the most use out of that. Otherwise, our support team always very, very responsive and very happy to answer questions over email. And additionally, if there's ever any single feature that you're curious about, hey, how does this work? Can I get more info on this data? This help icon in the bottom right corner. This opens up our knowledge base where you can either look through all the articles we've written on the different customizations, on all the different features, our getting started videos and things like that. Otherwise, if there's a specific thing you're looking at, let's say minimum stays, type it in here and we'll hook you up with the kind of appropriate video or article that really dives in deep here.
Fantastic. Love having that information, the knowledge base, those articles and tutorials right at your fingertips. That's so beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, definitely, yeah.
All right. Well, it doesn't seem like we have any more questions coming in. So is there any last things you guys need to share with the VRM family here?
I believe that's mostly it. If you're interested in learning more, of course, wait for that email. That'll come out a little later today. Otherwise, always feel free to shoot us an email at support@pricelabs.co. Otherwise, if you want to get in touch with me or Richie directly, Oliver@pricelabs.co here. That's my email. So simple spelling, just note it's .co and not .com. Otherwise, Richie's email, richie@pricelabs.co, and that's the best way to reach out to us. So expect that email in your inbox coming up pretty soon here with this recording. and I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thanks so much for having us and letting us talk to all of your users here. Always appreciated and always lots of fun.
Well, we thank you. We thank Richie, you too, and Oliver, of course. It's been a pleasure having you guys on VRM Insider today. Like you said, be on the lookout for the recording coming out, the replay available. And we can't wait to hear your testimonies, maybe have a VRM case study up there, a VRM client case study up there on PriceLabs next. So why don't you be their next success story? How about that? That's
I love
challenge. Challenge to all our VRM clients. All right, guys, have a beautiful rest of your week. Stay safe, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.